Hey guys, this is James with thegraymattersblog.com coming to you on another one of my walks through the beautiful South Texas woods. Today we're going to be doing another one of our videos where I have a guest with me. My friend Tyler's going to be here, and we're going to be talking about using tropes in stories, both in television, in movies, and in books, and how to use them in new and interesting ways, and also how that plays into character development and how the tropes relating to characters and character development and how that is done in new and interesting ways. So, Tyler, you were telling me about a series you'd been watching where they do a really good job with some of this trope subversion and character development. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, what I was talking about was an anime on Netflix called Parasite. And it borrows very heavily from what you'd consider to be most every vampire trope in modern era. You know, the cult of the vampires hiding away and slowly leaking into society to feed and everything else, and taking control of different aspects of our lives and trying to live in secrecy.
And just to interject here a little bit, one of the things it does in kind of a cool way is it adds something that has been done with vampires before, but is always a really cool way to take vampires, because of course these are not vampires, these are a type of parasite. But instead of taking vampires into the classic gothic horror way, it takes it into body horror. And one of the big parts of it is what these parasites do to people's bodies and how that can be very uncomfortable. Also, just a thing to know about body horror is one of the reasons body horror is scary is loss of control, which plays really into it. So, Tyler, go ahead and tell us a little bit about the plot and how that relates to like his character development.
Well, the main character is affected by one of these parasites, but due to a little of his own self-defense, it only is able to take over control of his arm, which then means that he has control over his body except for this hand, which they then have to, coexist and survive, because this is seen as a failure of the parasite to be able to take over. So the other parasites are actively hunting him.
And so how does this relate to his character development?
At the very beginning, he's seen as a very, kind, caring, and almost meek character. But by being put through these trials of being hunted, and his, merging with the parasite and starting to pick up some of their survival tendencies and their more cold and logical attitude, not ruled by any kind of emotion, he starts to change and be more akin to the parasites in their way of thinking and acting, and his just overall demeanor, which is brought out multiple times through it, of how he changes. The side characters bring it up, and it's a subplot of his childhood friends and family seeing this, this great change and just a complete 90-degree turn of his personality.
And so the personality of the parasites is kind of a cross between almost like Vulcan-like logic and then like animalistic type id, where it's all concerned with no emotions, just survival through the straightest line possible.
And consumption and, reproduction and surviving, which is a very drastic change from his initial, demeanor.
Which I find that really interesting, especially taking the classic id, the bestial mind that is concerned with, eating and, feeding and all these basic things with reproduction, and tying that in with this cold, logical sentience. I think that's a really cool twist on a trope in and of itself, while they're already twisting tropes, and getting to see him move to that, I think, is really cool. So, moving on to talking about some other shows and other things that do really well, and we're going to kind of cover some really diverse stuff. That's an anime. The next thing we're going to talk about is a video game that does a really great job with subverting tropes, and that's The Last of Us. If you've never played it, even if you're not a video gamer, highly recommend it. One of the things is it's a zombie story. And of course, like all zombie stories, it's really about people. And the main character, Joel, starts off as this blue-collar worker from Texas, and he's put through all this horrible stuff. I mean, his daughter dies in the first act, and it's showing him and his development and playing around with these tropes and how he develops different than you usually expect the protagonist of most of your zombie stories to. He's not a Rick Grimes. This is a very thing. He becomes very cold, very heartless, but then ends up having to protect a girl named Ellie, and it's kind of him coming back to human, but because of where he's been, he comes back to human in a really interesting way. One of the things is we're going to go ahead and discuss the ending. Spoiler alert on everything we're talking about. The girl, of course, because it does follow a lot of the tropes you would expect from a zombie story. Of course, she holds the cure. Within her brain is the secret to a cure for zombieism and a vaccine so that people could live in the world. The thing is, the only way to get it is going to be to kill her. So when he finally gets to the people who she's unconscious, she can't consent, and she's an underage girl anyway, they're just going to kill her, and he's being told, yeah, you just have to let us do this so that we can save the whole world. And he has come back to human. He cares about her. He loves her. He's bonded with her as a replacement daughter. And in doing so, the thing is, he still has these cold, hard instincts that have come on him while he's been in this brutal world. So he kills literally everybody. He just wipes out this entire facility of scientists, dooming the world, at least to continue as it's doing. There will be no cure. When she finally comes to, he goes, oh, yeah, we never found them. There's no guys there. When we got there, they were all gone. So he literally makes the decision that one life is more important than the entire world. And that is such an interesting character development. I also absolutely love discussing that with people and seeing where people fall on which is better, which is the correct choice. It's kind of the philosophical trolley problem. And I think that handles character development in such an interesting, different way than we see in other places.
And another aspect of character development is Ellie, the girl he's traveling with, also develops alongside him, but she kind of regresses, whereas he progresses back to having humanity. She starts to see the horror of the world, and she's faced with adversity and a bunch of really dark dark notions and actions that she has to do, and this kind of leaves her a little numb to the world. And so it's almost like they come to a trading of places in their personalities throughout the game.
And almost his protectiveness of her and his willingness to see no harm come to her is almost related to how hard she has to become. But then there's also the question of the world that made her have to be that way is going to be perpetuated, by the fact that he made it so there will be no cure. So it's just super complicated. Great character development on both of those. Now, another way this show subverts tropes is with its zombies. Now, it definitely goes with a more classic zombie. I mean, they're less intelligent. They are caused by cordyceps fungus, which, by the way, is a real thing. Cordyceps fungus zombies, in the real world, they only affect insects. But
so far.
Yeah, so far. Yeah, we're really worried that's going to be one of the next big crossover disease. After COVID, that's going to be cordyceps fungus. As soon as I see a mouse with cordyceps, I'm done.
Yeah.
But so, it's kind of similar. By the way, if you ever just want to be horrified and never sleep again, Google tarantula infected with cordyceps. It'll give you nightmares. But they are really different. They have these fungal growths. They navigate by sound and just have some kind of interesting stuff with them. While still maintaining true, they find a little more interesting, different way to do it.
Well, and I think that's one of the best ways to use a trope is taking the baseline, but building off of that baseline to make it yours and make it stand out. One of the problems I've had with a bunch of media, movies and books and TV shows since I was a kid, is the hardline tropes are so overused that, you can probably tell the ending of most movies before they ever happen. You can probably give an outline of 70% of this year's action movies without ever having to see them.
And that's true. With maximum, tell me who's starring in it and what the title is, and we can probably get pretty close.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about another thing that, speaking of zombies, that takes zombies and takes them in a completely different direction, is Sweet Home. And now is another show that's on Netflix. This is actually a Korean drama. They do really good dubbing on it, though. So if you like subs, if you like dubs, they've got both. And it's so interesting because they do a very different type of zombie, because these are not your standard infected, slow shambling zombies. They're also not your fast World War Z zombies. These zombies they become these big twisted mutants. And the thing is, what type of mutant you become once you get infected is actually tied to kind of your spiritual flaws. one person who's obsessed with being strong and is kind of a roid head, he turns into this giant hulking behemoth. Another guy who starts obsessing over the fact that he was too slow to protect someone, whenever he gets infected, he turns into this blistering fast speed demon. And they all become dangerous. And of course, there's the main character who kind of halfway becomes one, but is able to hang on to his humanity, and that's a big part of the plot. By tying it to your spiritual flaws, they take the very common zombie trope, where everyone's locked inside a tenement and trying to survive there. It's a very zombie story, but the monsters are very much not just zombies. And I feel like that's a really cool, really innovative way. Another thing they do that twists the tropes is the tropes that you would expect to see in a zombie movie. Like you had said, you expect to see, okay, big, muscular, attractive, dark-headed dude, good-looking woman in spandex doing flips, child who must be protected at all costs.
The typical runaround of who's who of what you're going to see. Not to diss on, Chris Evans or anything, but there's a bunch of people who look like cookie-cutter copies of him in A, B, and C list movies.
And in this, they do it very differently. Now, some of that is because it's a Korean movie doing American tropes. One of the things that, as a character we meet very early on, who once, the shit starts hitting the fan, he comes out, he's got a katana, he's, slaying monsters left and right, he's a total stone badass. But whereas in America, we would try to make him someone exotic, we might make him a Buddhist monk or something like that. The thing is, in Korea, they made him something they considered exotic. They made him a Christian. Because, there's just not a lot of Christians there. They find this a very strange foreign religion. And so, the very first time we see him is with a Bible, and everyone's like super judgy of him. And he's like, no, I'm just going to church. I'm not a missionary or something. And so, he quotes scripture, and he, prays before he fights off zombies, and he, is very self-sacrificing. And it's very much seeing Christianity not from a normal American standpoint where people are very used to it, and in fact, a lot of people have some negative thoughts about it, but when it's seen as this exotic religion, kind of the same way that we would look at Buddhism. So, okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap that up because we are getting low on time. This has been really fun. Really like doing these videos with someone else and a little bit of back and forth. Let me know if you guys liked it, and make sure that you take the time to log into your YouTube app so that you can like and subscribe, like the video, leave us a comment, let us know what you liked or didn't like or what you'd like to see next time, and I'll check you guys on my next walk.